Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of WARCAST for the Age of Ancestry. This is year 3, Wind your host. Today we're looking at is Feb 9th of year 3, of course. Let's dive right into this game. So basically, there was a couple things we looked at yesterday, and one thing was pointed out specifically to me, which I thought was pretty funny because I do get my information from many different sources. However, some people pointed something out to me, which I thought was pretty funny, and that I noticed later in the video, which probably doesn't look the best, but we're going to go over that shortly and clear things up a little bit. But first, let's take a quick look at what wars have finished today in the past 24 hours. So rejected Crayon's withdrawals to Revenge of the 80s. Now, I mean, it definitely looked like Rejected Crayons had this war on wraps for the first little bit, but the more intel that we got on the situation definitely made it seem less in their favor. And considering 80s was short provinces, they did extremely well reining that war in and taking control at the end. Our friends, the Dyslexic Defenders, defeat Smithcraft. I have a little bit of information on that as well. Wartime defeats Evil Friends, and Themeless, that crazy looking war, defeats Unnamed Kingdom, which will probably remain Unnamed Kingdom for quite some time. Based on what I know about the kingdom, there's not a whole lot going on there. And I do have a story that I'm going to post in the forums. It will be written up. To give some insight into what happened in that war. So definitely keep an eye on that. But before we do anything, let's take a quick look at the top 10. Of course, our friends Barco Loco at the top again, are still rather having a beer, after that win, pretty close behind. I mean, it's very likely that, Barco's just going to wait for having a beer to leave their ceasefire, unless, like break time or possibly, one of these other guys who finished their war a little bit earlier, such as recruiting attackers here. I mean, if they're in range, this is easy food for Barco to grab. So I mean, it's definitely some movement probably going to happen from Barco now. I don't think they'll want to let anyone get above them in that department. So let's take a quick look at the honor side of things, since we've had so many new war wins. Again, break time still at the top, followed of course by Beard now since their last war win. And then Gratz Fluid on his newborn, whoever that is. I have some ideas possibly I could say, but most people may not recognize the kingdom. If it's the kingdom I think it is, I mean, they were once called Oath. I'll just leave it at that. So let's look at some of the wars in progress, just to see if anything started since I last checked. It doesn't look like anything's going on. We got our longest war, I think, so far of the age here, still going on. Woods and Checkmate. Looks like Checkmate's finally tagged up. Good for them. Just one thing, before we look at the victories for the war, I just wanted to clear up something with regards to some of the numbers we were looking at on the Beers and Pillow Talk war. Now, it was pretty obvious, at the time, one side had provided numbers, which was basically right before they withdrew, which is what Pillow Talk did here. And then Beer's numbers here, the reason they're so much different is because this is right after withdrawal. So this after the acres bonus was tendered to both sides. And, the TPA and WPA and science has gone down versus the Pillow Talk numbers because the acres have increased. And if you look, obviously this is TPA and WPA numbers. So, that explains that drop there. And then the additional units probably just, aside from their peons that you get when you do finish the war, um, you know, they probably released or, they were probably, eventually released to create stronger economies. But with regards to the units, I guess they managed to actually train that number of troops in that time. So it looks like Pillow Talk was actually, on track to training more troops than beers. Whether or not that would have done anything for them in the war is won't be seen because obviously this war is over already. The last thing I wanted to point out is sometimes, unfortunately, when I'm transposing information, some things get left behind. Unfortunately, this was one of those instances where if you were watching the video yesterday, you have seen one of my sources leaked on the Pillow Talk war. Now, I do have a number of sources, and as reporters, we do work closely together. Some of us have been around a lot longer than others, so they have more contacts or better contacts in certain kingdoms, and we often rely on each other for information at times when we were doing reports. So you may have seen a name pop up under Pillow Talk here, or beers, whichever you saw. Um, there is an there's I'm not saying that you know that person is the monarch of either kingdom, but they do like to share information with me from their sources who, of course, have given them information to give to me. So, that was one of those names that popped up in there. I wasn't trying to out anybody. I'm in no way saying that that person was the monarch of either kingdom, but we definitely do share information as reporters. And sometimes people don't necessarily like to go to the reporter covering the story. Sometimes they like to use an intermediary. It helps maintain the anonymity factor. So now that little detail is cleared up and these numbers are explained, we can look at the wars that have completed today. So of course we have our rejected Crayon versus the 80s. Now again, it seemed like this war was rejected Crayons pretty much from the beginning. Um, Revenge of the 80s though, very strong performance here. I mean, it's I think what actually happened here is Crayons maybe got a little bit ahead of themselves, and because from some of the reports I was getting, was that maybe the TM game wasn't necessarily on point in this war, and 80s realized that very quickly, and they started capitalizing on that. At closer to the end there, I did pull some news, and I did see one of their smaller ferry who was actually was it the smaller ferry or the larger ferry? Anyway, one of the ferries that 80s has actually made a 200-acre hit on one of the attackers and rejected crayons. So you've got these unbreakable ferries that are growing out of control. They can hit your attackers for crazy gains. That was probably a strong indication that crayons really wasn't going to be able to do anything with this war. So great job 80s for winning that players down. I believe you did have some provinces in protection at the time throughout the war. So good job there, and rejected crayons. Um, I would have liked to see a stronger performance there. Maybe you just need to work on, as I said, the TM game a little bit, because definitely, this war, at least in my mind, was definitely yours to win. But again, great job to Revenge of the 80s for pulling it back and proving that, again, province is down, with better strategy and good planning, you can take out even the biggest of kingdoms. All right, so great job to everyone in that war. Let's move on to the next one. Evil Friends versus Wartime. Let's take a look here. I mean, this was just one of those wars that, two players down, definite skill difference between the two kingdoms. I mean, this was definitely Wartime's war to win, as the enemy did grow to meet them, so very zealous of them to attempt that. Um, and as you can see on the honor side of things, Wartime did a good job walking away with the honor as well as a decent amount of land. I mean, that's not that great, but going up 5,000 acres is good enough. I mean, they're in a pretty good position, I think, and they kind of waited, it seems like, for Evil Friends to come to them, um, and that benefited them. in this war. So great job to Wartime for such a decisive victory. Those are the kinds of wars we like to see, and not too far off from min time. So great decision making on both sides. Great job, everyone. Okay, so we got Unnamed Kingdom versus a Themeless War. Now, as I said, I do have an article coming up that will be posted later in the week as to what exactly was going on here and, what the situation is with this kingdom. But this just looks like a total farm war. And from what I understand, this Red Kingdom has absolutely no planning, no strategy, barely any leadership at all. So, I mean, if they somehow did manage to beat Themeless, that would be very sad times for Themeless. But they didn't. Themeless kicked their butt, took a ton of honor, took a ton of land. Great job, Themeless, even though, this was like beating up one of those inflatable dolls that you practice with for punching or something. I don't know what else to call this for. Great job, guys. Let's move on to the next one. MythCraft versus our friends Dyslectic Defenders. I can never say their name right the first time. Let's just go with this guy's name here. I think he's province number 1. I have Daily Sexia. I mean, you can't go wrong with that. I think anyone, would love to have that problem. If you could even call that a problem. So looking at the land side of things, our friends the defenders managed to, make their position strong very early on in the war, and they were refusing to give up any land. So they were doing a great job controlling the attackers on Mythcraft here, as well as the TM game was clearly theirs as well, because the honor side, they were brought down a tiny bit, which is not uncommon when you see smaller or less honor kingdoms going after kingdoms with more honor. Obviously, there's more honor to take. And if you focus on provinces with the most honor, and that kingdom has only a few provinces with a good amount of honor, it's very easy to deplete those numbers and make it seem like a lot worse than it actually is. Because when it comes to these graphs, the easiest things to swing are land and honor. The hardest things to swing are net worth. So when you see big differences in net worth, that's usually a pretty strong indication that something noteworthy is going down, especially if it occurs in the same tick, such as withdrawal from war, where the winning kingdom gets a nice little bonus here. Let's take a quick look at the numbers for this war. They were provided to me. So, just after min time, the war had ended. This information is from 310 side of things. And, just in case we forgot who everyone is, 310 is our friends, the defenders, and Mythcraft is 5-4. Okay, so, defenders. I'm just going to write it here. And Mythcraft. All right. So, it's pretty good effort by both sides here. Uniques are fairly even. I'm just going to put the names down here to avoid any confusion with the total attacks and total attacks suffered. That could be confusing for anybody who's just looking at it without listening or missing the first little bit. No massacres. I guess they didn't really need to control any TMs, or they just felt it wasn't necessary. Looking at the acres traded, though, I mean, that is a huge difference. What could possibly have affected that? Probably all these dryads that they have versus these faster armies that are running on Dyslectic's side. They do have some avians over here, but at the end of the day, clearly, that the attacks that were made were definitely not as good as whatever the humans were doing. There's only about 50 extra attacks, but still on a min time war, that's an extra attack every hour. So factor in, that, and that's quite significant damage considering you only need about, I'd say, 6 to 10 armies to really chain someone down into the dumps to the point where most players wouldn't even know how to recover from that. So again, just looking at some of the attacks, you got guys that are untouched here basically. So I'm not sure what the plan was on the enemy side, but clearly it was to focus a little too heavily on the bottom end here. I mean, that's a high saturation of hits there. If we add up the hits on these guys alone, that makes up the majority of the hits total here. Um, so I mean, it's probably just a bad distribution of firepower, I think, on MythCraft's side. They definitely focused, I think, a little bit too much on some of these provinces. But again, they fought pretty hard. But at the end of the day, Defenders has been having such strong performances in all their wars. It seems like they're following a pretty similar pattern. They and to be honest, it's the kind of pattern you see in a min-time victory war. I mean, you really want to assert your dominance and be in control of the TM game within the first 12 hours. If you're smaller, you want to achieve convergence and then divergence within the 24 to 36 hour range, and then by 48 hours, you really want to, you really has to be clear that there's no way the enemy could defeat your strategy or circumvent anything. I take what I said back earlier about the dryads and the acre thing. That doesn't really make any sense. It seems like they were able to march fairly evenly, possibly Godspeed, or maybe some of those dryads are actually avians. We'd have to pull the kingdom intel to check, but there's plenty of wars to go on. So I mean, plenty of time to look at stuff like that. Other than that, great job, defenders. As I said, I will be looking a lot more closely at the wars in the future. I don't want to give too much information away as to kingdom's war strategy so early on in the age, or dissect wars to the point where the strategy has to be changed by the kingdom, who is viewed by the community. I mean, it's good to keep rotating things, but in a game with limited possibilities and limited options, once you commit to a build or war plan, generally you kind of have to stick to that for most of the age. Granted, out of protection wars are different than mid-age and end of age wars, but you understand what I'm saying here. So great job to defenders again, and again, shout out to their number one province there. I have Daily Sexia. Great name. Great name. Okay, let's move on to the next war. Great job, everyone. My lovely Utopia News province that I've been just trying to starve since forever. My building efficiency just keeps going up, and I can't seem to kill all my peasants. Clearly terrible at Utopia. All right, let's move on to the next thing. Here's our war chart. I mean, I don't think anything else has started since we last checked it, but a quick refresh will tell us one way or the other. Nice, that thing's working. Good, good. Yeah, it looks like nothing else has changed since then. So moving on to the next war. Oh yes, our war that's currently in progress. The longest war so far of the age, I believe. 276 hours. We have the Woods versus now tagged Checkmate. Checkmate having an extremely strong performance here. I mean, based on this trending pattern here, um, Woods is definitely kind of getting baited into whatever it is that they're doing. Every movement here is just showing Checkmate making a move, and Woods is taking some serious damage. Although Woods is having their moments of these little spikes in land that they're grabbing, but I don't think that's they can really maintain that based on what I'm seeing here. I mean, this is what I call a full smiley face effect. I mean, we were looking at this earlier, but it's true. Like you got your mouth here and you got your eyes, and that's the smiley face war. You don't get to see these very often. I mean, usually, a kingdom, would withdraw here, or they'd withdraw here or here when they realize, they've gone 24 hours and unable, and I think this is more than 24 hours. This is like 48 hours, and they were unable to really make a difference. But see, that's, in the older wars, this was entirely normal. I mean, it's just the way the game mechanics were designed at the time, and players weren't exactly rushing to finish wars by min time. I mean, I design my war strategies around usually min time victories. Very rarely do I plan for a 5-day war. I just don't like having to, you know, miss sleep and run waves and stuff at all kinds of crazy hours, especially now when attack times are slightly longer than what we were used to before. That definitely plays a part in it. Um, so I'm not sure what the plans are for this war, but it's definitely going to be a tough battle for the Woods, depending on what direction they're going in. I did have some information with regards to what's going on the KD Econ side of things. Essentially, the bottom line is, despite Woods having about 70K combined more TPA, WPA, and science compared to Checkmate, it doesn't seem to be making too much of a difference from them. For them, as Checkmate seems to have the lead on troops, soldiers, as well as peons. Income-wise, they're making about 180K more per tick, kingdom-wide. They're making slightly less runes, but you know, that's clearly not an issue. Runes are clearly not an issue here. I mean, the Woods maybe fallen into the same trap that Crayons did, um, where lack of TM coordination and closing out the war, um, you know, really hurt their chart numbers. That we look at it today versus 3 days ago. Um, Huge changes in that war. Normally, we would see a convex shape on the war. Two kingdoms rise, or one kingdom rises to the next kingdom to meet them. They have their waves. They go down or stay fairly steady at the beginning, and then once the kingdom really ramps up and they make their big power plays and take down those big provinces, that's when the net worth will start dropping lower on both sides, provided they're having a nice good fight. But in this case, Checkmate has a lot of advantage in the sense that they have the experience for these longer wars, and it's very common for them to have fought these wars in the past. Bishop Delirium has a lot of experience in wars like this. I remember one of my first wars against Checkmate back in the 70s when I joined the now Crayons Kingdom. Um, it was a really tough war, and at the beginning it didn't look like we were going to win, but it was one of those wars we won through attrition, and after a week and a half, Checkmate finally withdrew from that war. But a lot of people were really upset with the monarch and the leadership at that time for even letting the war get to that point. So hopefully, the Woods doesn't take it too hard. Checkmate is a great kingdom with lots of experience, really good players, really good monarch that's been in the game for a long, long time. He doesn't like to talk very much, but I'm sure, if you're in his kingdom, you would appreciate his contributions. So best of luck to both sides. Woods, um, all I can say is take what you can and get out, because I don't think Checkmate's going to withdraw from this war, not after the past 3 days. But best of luck. Why not take the war longer? See what you can do, see what you can accomplish. I mean, what are you going to do? Sit out of war or sit in ceasefire for 4 days and then maybe find another war? You're already in war. Enjoy it. All right, let's move on to the next one. How come we can't fund dragons versus Sons of Anarchy Hostile? This is a nice close war. 102 hours now. I mean, it seems to have only intensified, but definitely Sons of Anarchy still maintaining a strong position here. Quick look at the honor side of things. How come we can't fund dragons is just taking back that honor. So maybe it's not as it seems on the net worth side of things. A lot of TM damage probably being done. Some key provinces with lots of honor being taken down. All these things are very possible that would affect that. Looking at this, however, a clearly significant damage done to these dwarfs here. I mean, they're really pounding their attack core here, whereas there's a couple of dryads and dwarfs, kind of at the bottom, the maximum damage end of the net worth here. Quick look at the land to see who's, relatively in control here. Um, you know, Definitely a lot of land on how come we can't fund dragons. they're definitely soaking it up. Now, I mean, whether, I'm thinking that Halfling and the Fairy are probably, unbreakable, and all we're seeing here is a bit of minor op damage and maybe them losing their wizards or thieves doing some ridiculous ops. Who knows without the intel or op data. And on the opposite side of things, I mean, these are all attackers at the top here. So to be honest, it almost looks like, how come we can't fund dragons might actually be in the better position here. The net worth saturation, it might be a tiny issue for them, but this undead here, if he's unbreakable, they're definitely in bad shape. Same with this halfling and this fairy. And if this halfling is like a rogue or halfling fairy, or this fairy's a fairy fairy or fairy halfling or fairy gnome even, or even a fairy dark elf, you're going to have a lot of ops coming at you. And it kind of looks like, these guys at the top have just been growing similar to these attackers, but these attackers are probably very vulnerable to ops. Again, probably why the honor is running away. They have a lot of attackers at the top here, with very low TPAs and wizards per acre counts. So very likely why um, the Blue Kingdom here is running away with the honor, because Sons of Anarchy put their attackers into a position where they were very oppable. And not only that, but they were doing some nice chaining, so they're taking a lot of honor with them as well. But that only works against you once your provinces can no longer stop ops or spells from taking your honor and destroying your province. Um, Definitely though, I don't think this war's anywhere near over. Both sides have a good chance. I mean, again, remember, Blue Kingdom rose to meet Sons of Anarchy for their hostile wave, and while they were bigger net worth wise, they still didn't have the time. um, Again, being bigger, just there's benefits to that. I'm not going to go into detail now, but the longer you're bigger for, the better off you are. That's the easiest way I can say it. So best of luck to both sides in this war. Definitely nowhere near over. I can see this war going for another day or two. I think this is just going to come down to what these top end provinces actually look like. Although I could tell you right now, from what I've seen in the world, these orcs, dryad, are probably very low defense given their net worth per acre. This dwarf is probably tanky. He can sit at home probably and not march too much of his army, and possibly stay somewhat unbreakable, or make them have to suicide in order to attack him. But it looks like both sides have done a pretty good job controlling attackers on both sides. I mean, we got a dryad and a dwarf, a dryad and an orc, a dwarf and a dark elf. Now these dark elves, they didn't lose very much net worth, so it kind of makes me think they may have been attackers or some type of hybrid. Um, this is possibly why they weren't very big in the beginning. It's definitely a little bit harder for them to get started out, but once these dark elves get going, they can be a real powerhouse. But when they're kind of small or in the middle, and then they're made small, not the greatest province for being a hybrid. I mean, you'll have a good TPA Wizards Breaker advantage, providing you pumped or have enough to begin with. But it's one of those races that makes a great turtle race or support caster in regular ages, or just in general. It's a great hybrid to run, especially if you're running like a fairy dark elf. We'll leave that at that, though. We want to kind of have some further discussions with the WARCAST crew. That is, Sap, Smiles, Mickey, Cheatsy, Persian Cat, anyone that's willing to join the conversation. We want to look a little bit closer at some of the race combinations, specifically the TM side of things, just to see, break it down a little bit and figure out, is this balanced? Is it overpowered? How should you play it? How do you deal with it? Important questions like that. So best of luck to both sides in this war. Again, nowhere near over. Um, Again, though, as I said before, I think this is going to come down to who's on top and what their offense and defense numbers look like, and of course what peasant counts look like across the kingdom. I'm sure there's some dragons going on here. Definitely, if anyone wants to share that information, I'd be more than happy to post it on the next podcast. So let's move on to the next war here. Absolutely ferocious versus our Noah kingdom. I think Noah has kind of always been in the lead for this, the entirety of this war, and as you can see, they are maintaining that lead. I mean, with their standard, and what I mean by the staircase effect, it kind of looks like they have little staircase every wave, little staircase, and the same thing for the enemy. I'll just do it on the other side. It's a little bit less defined on this side, which makes me think, the Red Kingdom is actually having slightly better planned waves, or slightly faster waves, whereas Noah seems to be doing a little bit more damage over a longer period of time, which leads me to believe they might be a little bit more army in, army out in comparison to absolutely ferocious, who you can see they have their wave, and it's a pretty good little dip there, pretty good little dip, pretty fast. Whereas Noah has their wave, and it's a gradual dip. Seems like they're pretty laid back kingdom. Probably a good place to war actually. It can be very relaxing when you army in, army out, and you always have your orders posted. It's easy to run a province when the leadership and the monarch are good about stuff like that. We're kind of seeing the same thing on the Kingdom Network side of things. Kingdom Honor, again, ferocious battle, absolutely ferocious. These Red Kingdoms got it right. Honor-wise, they're doing a great job here. Both sides fighting extremely hard. I think again, this is gonna come down to, what do these provinces actually look like? They have a significant number, over 1,000, a couple approaching 2,000, and the small end here, they're definitely not as small. They're definitely in charge of the net worth bracket here. Um, so I think this is definitely, again, as I said, Noah's war to win. But still, Red Kingdom is absolutely ferocious, literally to their name. They're not giving in. They're trying not to give an inch of that honor away. Look at every wave they pull back. They're on top again, on top again. Excellent performance, excellent TM ops, and spells must be happening here. Very strong trend line. However, you know, as you can see by this bottom trend line, um, our friends here are actually growing. Whereas even though Absolutely Ferocious is fighting extremely hard, it's only a matter of time before Noah is able to just completely take advantage of the situation and attempt to walk away with as much honor and land as possible in this situation. Quickly, a little look at the um, land here. If you change these, move these bars to the opposite positions, this one to the top and this one to the bottom, you're getting the same story as in the flip side when we were looking at the honor side of things. It's the same situation. Kingdom of Noah is on an upward trend as judged by the line I just erased, whereas Absolutely Ferocious, even though they are ferocious, this is this is their trend line. That's their trend triangle. That's what I'm going to call it. Versus Noah's here. You could see just by looking at these lines the patterns. I know a lot of data is missing here, but trend analysis is usually fairly accurate when it comes down to who's determinately in charge of the war, or it's usually a pretty good gives you a pretty good concept or idea of who's in a better position or who's going to win this war. So definitely, great war on both sides, but I think Noah is likely to take this one. They just seem to have a very strong strategy. And as I said, even though Red Kingdom is absolutely ferocious, I'm just going to keep saying their name. Um, I don't think they're ferocious enough to take on the Reborn of NOAH in this instance. But by all means, prove me wrong. Let's see a swing back. Do what Checkmate did if you can, and bring that war back. But again, with such strong trend lines and then never being and never never able to achieve convergence on any of their waves. I mean, these are all waves here. Um, there's zero convergence. I mean, the closest ones to mention, I mean, let's just change the color up here a tiny bit to make it easier to see. But the closest one, or the closest chances they have, is probably here and maybe here, maybe a little bit here as well. But they were never really able to achieve convergence. So, based on that alone, I feel Noah is going to be the victor here. But again, Red Kingdom doing a great job not letting all the honor go, not letting all the land just run away. They still have a lot of fight in them. However, Noah is taking a lot from them. But as you can see, as I said, they got a nice strong chain at the start here, which brought them down significantly. But every wave, they're bringing back those acres. But those are acres they can't defend. So, um, I think you know what time it is. All right, let's move on to the next war. Good luck to both sides. Um, we got the Simpsons versus Monsters. Quick look here, see what's going down. Simpsons, or sorry, Monsters, as we saw in the last podcast, took a bit of a dip there. Um, Pretty significant actually on the net worth side of things. Not good, not a good sign for them. Um, and again on the honor side, not a good sign for them. One province down, um, well past min time. I think especially after the war was definitely a lot closer. I think it would have been a definitely stronger finish here at the end, similar to these waves we're seeing here. However, this loss of a province or whatever happened exactly at this point right here was just devastating for Monsters War, and it's definitely not one they were able to recover from because, as you can see, this situation is only getting worse. So, they're definitely Simpsons found an opening, and they're definitely taking advantage of it. So great job to both sides. Good job to Simpsons for sticking it out and waiting for that advantage, and then securing your position. So good job there. I'll just take a quick look and see what the honor side of things looks like. Again, Simpsons taking control after that dip, approximately here, right here-ish. Huge whatever happened there was a huge loss for them. So definitely, this is kind of where the war looks like it's trending. Why did Tom quit? Let's take a quick look at the net worth side of things. Tom's still in control of this. Not as firmly as before. Definitely, almost let it slip here a little bit on what would be January 8th here, year three. But still, the Tom Kingdom is actually doing pretty well. And of course, Tom leading the war, that is actually a joke. I doubt Tom is actually leading the war. He's barely around. I mean, he's barely around in Muga most of the time, so I just don't see how he could run a warring kingdom. It's just that this doesn't add up unless he actually is putting that much effort into leading the war. But then again, losing to pirates, just the numbers and the facts just don't add up. Um, but looking at the land on both sides, we're just going to quickly look at the bottom three provinces and top three provinces. We got a human, avian, human on Drunken Party, and an avian, human, dwarf on the Tom Kingdom. Pretty similar takedowns. It looks like mostly attackers at the bottom. This halfling is possibly a TM. Maybe he did take a random one-off hit for 150 acres. That's totally normal. But it looks like so the TMs were mostly untouched on the Tom Kingdom side. Looking at the bigger provinces, we'll just flip this around to the top. We only got one ferry, and it looks like all the other ferries are small. So, just by rights, I would say that the Tom Kingdom, if they can take out this Streaking Daughters B-Day party, that's really their last hope to do very much in this war for Drunken Party. I mean, their attack core is in bad shape. Their what appears to be their TMs are very small and not very high in net worth. However, they probably can do a good amount of damage still to the core attackers that are at the bottom end of the net worth bracket here. And again, if they haven't massacred these fairies or done anything to control them a little bit. They're probably just pounding away at them with ops. I would expect no less. A quick look at the honor side will give us a little bit of insight. And definitely that's the case. The Tom's Kingdom, they've got a lot of attackers at the top here. That are probably running away with acres, but looking at the net worth per acre, they're actually doing pretty well in comparison to their counterparts over here. So whoever is leading the Tom Kingdom, great job there. You're definitely giving a nice performance, especially after losing to Pirates, and the fact that you're one province down and um, you know still doing such a good job is very good. Although you can see how having that one province down definitely hurts in the honor department. And then, not having too many TMs in a good position to do very much damage. Although, like this fairy must be a TM, like a pure TM. Same with this halfling. Same with this, like these two. I mean, a one-off hit probably here by one of their highest offense attackers, nothing to write home about. Although, it seems like there is a little bit of TM power lacking on the Tom Kingdom side. I'm just not seeing it. Unless, I guess not. I mean, two elves, a fairy, some halflings, they're probably fairies or, fairy, halfling fairies, probably something like that. Dwarfs are maybe hybrids versus we got a bunch of humans, some orcs, more fairies, and some halflings. I mean, this drunken party's definitely got a great setup here. The Tom Kingdom, decent setup as well. Although, personally, I think I would have gone with more fairies. But again, it's based on the first race that you choose. So very likely, I mean, all their TMs here could be fairies. So they got 2, 4, 6, and maybe these dwarves are TMs as well. These two are pretty big. This one's been beaten down pretty hard, but judging by their net worth breakers, I don't think they are TMs. They're probably just lazy or turtley attackers. So good luck to everyone in this war. Although it does look like the Tom Kingdom, although they may not be able to walk away with the honor in this one. Um, I think, this is definitely a war they could win, and no matter what happens, they're going to take a good amount of land out of it. So best of luck to everyone in that war. Let's take a quick look at the most recent wars. This one being 45 hours old, so I guess sorry, there's still um, this war to go. It's WTF versus Weekend now. No war. Thank you very much. Um, Definitely WTF is still in control of this war on the land side of things, but you know what that means. It's really what the net worth side of things looks like. WTF raises to meet their opponent, the Blue Kingdom here, and achieves convergence pretty early on. I mean, this is probably that's a really strong wave, and again, a really strong wave by Red Kingdom. And as you can see, they've got such a gradual, and they're actually gaining acres in that one. But as you can see, they've got such a gradual decline. It's very soft the way they're being put down versus the way that they're dealing with the Blue Kingdom here. That's a pretty significant groove. And they're doing that wave over wave, so they're chaining provinces to dust here, whereas the Red Kingdom is probably just doing a little bit soft, little love taps, and controlling economy, mashing up buildings a little bit. And as you can see, that's what we're seeing here as well. I mean, look at the depth of the chains on the Blue Kingdom here versus the WTF Kingdom. I mean, their lowest is 564 acres, highest is 1800. These guys don't even come close to that. 200 and barely 1100. And when you're looking at damage wise, again, these are some heavy duty chains here. Looks like this Dryad was probably just chained recently. Same with this human. They haven't released their acres yet. WTF probably looking for those kill shots to show their dominance and maintain control of the charts. As you can see here, they're obviously trying to make some big plays to take that honor, but the Blue Kingdom is definitely not letting it go very easily. Um, Definitely a good battle here, but it definitely seems like WTF has the military power, and the Blue Kingdom may have the TM power in this war. But again, WTF is one province down. So, I mean, it really comes down to who's unbreakable, how much offense does each side have, what's the core's average defense, and can anything be done to break the unbreakable provinces on either side? Those are all questions you want to ask yourself when you come to a point in the war past min time. How do we approach this? Which way do we proceed? Those are some pretty important questions to ask yourself. So definitely something to take away from this war. Great job to both sides. Let's move on to the next one. Good luck to everyone in that war. We've got Unnamed Kingdom versus Meet the Flintstones. Now, I mean, just looking at the numbers here, Meet the Flintstones is down one, but still, taking off. They're doing a great job here. This war is only 29 hours old, and basically, right away, they asserted their dominance here, and the Red Kingdom wasn't even able to pull them below this trend line. I mean, it's definitely weak performance on the Red Kingdom side. Blue Kingdom's staying, as I said, on this trend line, whereas the Red Kingdom is making quite a strong decline here. Definitely not working in their favor here. Um, this is a war that, is pretty obvious. It looks like it's going in one direction. Um, the next 24 hours will say for sure, but definitely not a good situation um, for the kingdom here. Still time to go though, so I mean they might have time to pull something off. But again, it seems like the Blue Kingdom is doing extremely well in controlling this war. And again, you kind of see the trend lines match up here. We got a nice steady line with Meet the Flintstones, and they're growing, versus the negative trend line of Unnamed Kingdom here going down. Looking at the land side of things, um, again, we're seeing the same thing. Strong trend line down, and an average to rising trend line for the Blue Kingdom. So great job, Meet the Flintstones. You're doing excellent in your war planning and execution. Definitely a war to keep an eye on. There's definitely some skill on the Flintstones Kingdom. So great job to everyone in this war, and we'll see how that one goes closer to min time. Let's look at the next one. We got Unnamed Kingdom versus Classic Video Games. This war has only started 14 hours ago. Let's take a quick look here. I mean, this war looks like it's pretty obvious what's going on here. We're just going to flip over to the land side of things and take a look at what's going on. No convergence. This is kind of strange until this point here. But I guess they only started their war 14 hours ago, so it makes perfect sense actually. It would have been right about here. Let me just mark that down uh, in a better color too. That's fine. Their war kind of started in this general area here. Um, so war was declared around here. I guess they had some kind of hostile wave go down here. Possibly a second. Sorry, one person's having their wave here. So definitely looks like a wave going on for the Red Kingdom over here. Possibly another mini wave from the Red Kingdom here. It's really interesting, actually. Red Kingdom seems to be getting a lot of attacks um, going in here. Actually, they're doing extremely well taking that land. Probably just slow armies marching, actually. That's all it is. Looking at the net worth side of things, we're seeing pretty strong performance here by the Blue Kingdom. And again, a very strong performance here, bringing them down. But Red, fights back, gives a very strong performance on their wave. And then the subsequent wave here shows a very strong wave as well. However, we got two instances now for the classic video games kingdom where we're seeing, this steep decline here, which is never good to see. I mean, it was visible here earlier. Um, Red Kingdom does have a similar decline, but it seems to be lessening. And in fact, it's actually turning in the opposite direction. Sorry, that's not a very good color to use. Let me just brighten it up a little bit so that's just obnoxious. But yeah, I mean, as you can see, these lines up here, the damage that they're taking seems to be decreasing, because not only is the line shortening from here to here, you can see the angle is changing as well. Whereas, the enemy is just on a steady decline. And, each wave is less, fortuitous for them. So you see here, I mean, same pattern, except going in the opposite direction. slightly more steady path trending upwards, and then a slow downwards trend, and then a much stronger downward trend. Again, looking at these trend lines can tell you a lot, but definitely knowing how wars work and how kingdoms interact and how wars work could definitely help you read these trend lines. This is not make or break by any means. Definitely, if you had all the intel, you might come to some different conclusions, might focus on different topics. But I have limited access to intel, limited stealth and mana, and there's only so many people willing to share information in the game. So I do the best with what I've got. Best of luck to both kingdoms. This war has just started. Definitely anybody's war. However, it looks like Unnamed Kingdom is doing extremely well so far. So we'll see how the war goes. But definitely still anybody's war at this time. But again, as I said, Red Kingdom appears to be in control currently. So good luck to both sides. Look at the last war. We got WARHorses versus War Greed. Quick look at the net worth side of things. I mean, War Greed in a strong position here. Again, this war only started about 9 hours ago, so we're on Feb 9th. They basically started Jan 1st here. So I guess what we're seeing here, sorry, where's my little thingy here? Green is actually working the best. So, this is part of their hostile wave here, and then it goes full on into war at this point. So if you just look at the damage that's being done here, it's pretty similar. I mean, both kingdoms seem to be fairly evenly matched. Who's going to walk away from this one? Definitely looks like Red Kingdom may have or maybe doing a little bit more damage. But Blue Kingdom is in a very strong position to begin with, so their war is probably going to be a little bit easier because they did start in the larger position with more honor. I mean, that says it all. I feel they'll be a little bit more beneficial. I'll enjoy them more after mid age. So definitely keep an eye on those for the forums. I will be updating the Utopia News website this weekend, hopefully, mostly just with links and some more stories that will be posted in the forums as well. But as I said, any support that anyone's willing to provide, I'm more than happy to accept it. Also, if anyone is interested in helping out with the news, please reach out to me. Always like to have more people involved who are willing to participate. At the end of the day, that's the most important thing and what's going to keep this game alive. So thank you so much for watching, everyone. This is your reporter Wind signing off. The current date is actually Feb 10th, year 3. So thank you, everyone, for watching, and